Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. It's good to see you all here. It's been a couple weeks, so glad we can get back together. Today is the 18th of May, 2025. Let's jump over to our agenda, and this is what we're looking at today. So we have a new microphone in the house, the Topping CL101 large diaphragm condenser microphone with an XLR output. So that'll be our main topic for today. Just as a reminder, this is a workshop which goes along with our courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. It looked like there was a note in the chat here. Somebody didn't realize we weren't having a session last week. If you go to school.learnlightandsound.com and sign up for free, you don't even have to buy one of the courses, and opt into the mailing list, you'll always get an email ahead of time if, what the topic for the session is going to be, or if we're not going to have a session. So if you want that, advance notice, it'll always be there. All right, this is not a review, but it is our first time working with this microphone. Again, this is a workshop. We're going to kind of put it through some paces, take a look at what it is, what's special about it, so on and so forth. And that's what we'll do. So we have a question that was submitted ahead of time. We'll come back to that at the end. I do want to acknowledge a couple of things. There's a question that was actually posed, I think it was by Mr. Joe Gooch. We'll come back to that as well. I just want to let you know that I did see that, and we will come back to it. And then also Matt Ruff. Oh no, not Matt Ruff. Audio Buff. Had a little experience in front of 1,400 people. Worst audio mistake ever. # epic. Digital console got me good. Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more too. And there's already some discussion in there about analog versus digital and back and forth. I think there are pros and cons to each, but yeah. Great topic. We'll come back to that. Okay, let's take a look at this Topping Professional CL101 microphone. And let me just pull some things up here. Let's go to the Mac here real quick first and take a look. So Topping is a company based in China. It looks like the entire company is in China, as far as I can tell. The contact number listed on the site is a Chinese phone number. This microphone, the Topping CL101, well, actually, let me give you some background on them. I believe they started making hi-fi equipment originally, analog hi-fi equipment. They do have a series of audio interfaces as well and speakers, which I assume are near-field monitors. Yes, active studio monitor. So it's a near-field monitor, but they also have a series of audio interfaces, which also look somewhat intriguing. And then the CL101 is their first microphone. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Just looking at the site here, they call it a studio condenser microphone. Comes with a shock mount. It comes with a pop filter. We'll show you those in just a moment here. XLR output. They call it a cardioid polar pattern, but as we'll see, and this is an important lesson, I think, as you get more experience in audio, you realize when a company calls its microphones polar pattern cardioid or supercardioid or hypercardioid, those are not distinctly defined. The edges of where, between maybe cardioid and supercardioid are not clearly defined. There's no industry standard, as far as I'm aware, to say, oh, this one falls into the cardioid polar pattern camp, and this one is a supercardioid. So you'll even notice here, based on the diagram, there is a bit of a tail on this microphone. So we'll take a look at that, or listen to that. It is a large diaphragm condenser microphone with a typical size, 34 millimeter. It is very small. We'll take a look at that. It also claims very low noise. It claims that the self noise is 4 dB A-weighted. And there's some unique things about the way they listed that in their specs that I have questions about, but that's definitely in the same category as the RODE NT1. So here's the polar pattern graph, which is, first of all, kudos to Topping for actually showing that the polar response is different at different frequencies. I think that's really important. A lot of times you will see, I don't know if Rode does it on theirs. Let's see if they do. If we go to the user guide, are there downloads? Where can I find the... I don't know if RODE does it on this particular mic, but a lot of times they'll show a single trace on a polar graph like this. And it leaves people with the impression that, oh, this is a cardioid microphone, or this is a supercardioid microphone. Well, you can see at different frequencies, the size of the tail, the size of the sensitivity on the back of the microphone is stronger than it is at other frequencies. So if we look down here, let's see, let me orient myself here. I think the higher, these are the higher frequencies on the right, lower frequencies on the left from what I can gather. And it looks like, for example, at 100 hertz, it's, or even less, at 200 hertz, it's the least sensitive on the back, and it's actually the most sensitive on the back. No, actually, this must be the bass over here. No, that's weird. That's weird. Usually bass is a little bit more prominent at the back, but in any case, this is saying, if I'm reading this right, at 2,000 or 2 kilohertz, for example, it's picking up more of that here at the back, and that as well. That's actually pretty unique. So we'll actually talk into the sides and the back of the mic so you can hear what that sounds like. But this, they call it cardioid, but I think others might call it supercardioid. It's not that traditional, just heart-shaped trace that you sometimes see on cardioid microphones. This I appreciate as well. So here is their off-axis sensitivity overall. So what's interesting here is that some of these higher frequencies are depending on what degree off axis you are, you get a different response here. So that's an interesting view that not a lot of manufacturers provide. So Topping, thank you for that as well. That's really good. Let's see, they have a gold-plated, usually it's sputtered, excuse me, sputtered. Usually it's sputtered. Here they say plated. In any case, large diaphragm condenser microphone, ultra low noise, 4 dB. They're listing it. This is what was curious to me. They listed as dB SPL, sound pressure level, A-weighted. Typically, this measurement, the equivalent input noise, is, I believe, a dBu measurement, not a dB SPL measurement, which I don't know if that's just a mistranslation. I did notice that most of the site looks like it was originally written in Chinese and then translated based on some of the things they said. So for example, here at the top, versatile performer, sound with ease. That kind of seems like translated English to me. And maybe this is just a translation error, that it's not actually dB-SPL, but it's dBu A-weighted. So in any case, that means it's a very quiet microphone. We'll do some samples here to get a sense for that. Here's the overall frequency response. Again, this is probably averaged, but it does look like there's a substantial boost here, somewhere in the realm of 3 to 4 dB across, starting somewhere around 1 kilohertz. It starts ascending, getting more sensitive, and then has a little bit of a fall off here around, 8 kilohertz, bumps back up, and then falls off between 10 and 20 kilohertz. So that's interesting. We'll hear what that sounds like. It's very small. I'll show you that in just a moment here. Let's see. Dual layer pop filter, just like the RODE NT1 series. It's actually fairly heavy for its size. It's tiny, but it's a 405 grams. It can handle up to 140 dB sound pressure levels. That's pretty good. So they're showing it here, for example, miking a drum. And a couple of colors, black and white. It also does include a carry case, a shock mount, a kind of a traditional shock mount, although it's relatively smaller than most, and a pop filter that comes in this carry case as well. Specifications, couple things. Again, they list the equivalent input noise at 4 dB SPL A-weighted, which is, again, an odd thing. I'm not sure what they mean by internal noise level. The output impedance is rated at less than 68 ohms, so that's actually makes it so you can use it with preamps that don't have the highest input impedance. There are some older boards out there, mixing boards, for example, that have an input impedance around, maybe 1200 ohms or something like that. So this one should work pretty nicely with that and be able to still achieve a bridging impedance. If you don't know what any of that means, just know that this microphone can work with almost any audio interface, any mixing board, any field recorder without a problem. And I do appreciate that they list things like this. This is one thing that a lot of manufacturers don't list, is the current consumption. So when you do turn on phantom power, it is a microphone that requires phantom power. This one will draw 5 milliamps. And that's probably a max if I had to guess. All right, let's go to the overhead camera and let's show you the mic. You have not heard it yet. We're still talking about it here. We're getting warmed up. So this is the microphone, and just to give it a comparison in terms of size, here's the RODE NT1 Signature Series, which is the same size as the RODE NT1 5th generation, RODE NT1 4th generation, and all of the previous NT1s. So it is substantially smaller, but it is actually heavier, which is interesting, just a little bit heavier. But as you can see, looks like the capsules, which I'm trying to get the reflected light on them here, be harder on the topping. Oh, there it is. They're roughly the same size there, it looks like. Like the RODE NT1, there are no switches at all. So there's no high-pass filter, low-cut filter, no dB, no pad, there are no different polar patterns. It's all just what they call cardioid. And then, of course, an XLR output on the bottom, and that's basically it. So very simple design, feels very well constructed. Every bit is solid, and maybe even more solid than the RODE just because it's heavier. Maybe it feels like this metal is thicker than the body of the NT. Does also come with a shock mount, and the thing I appreciate about the shock mount, it's a little bit more compact, obviously, because we have a more compact mic. It's one that you squeeze it to open up the diameter there. You can just slide it right in like that. And there we go. And then also, while we're here, let me just grab the box here. This may or may not be in focus. If you can let me know, Danny, we'll adjust it. But just has a foam insert here. It does have the 5/8 to 3/8 inch adapter. So common. And then down here, second layer, we have just a quick guide, and we have our pop filter. So we'll pull that out in case we need that guy here, just so you can see that. And that's it. So the hard case is got looks like metal edging and plastic sides, which is nice. In light of the fact that this microphone retails for $159 US, that's actually pretty impressive. I believe the NT1 Signature Series is $199, and it only comes with a cloth bag that you can put it in. So this comes with a bit more. All right, so let's do this. Let's pause here, see if there are any questions so far, and then we're going to get some sound samples. So we'll go back to the main camera while I set this guy up, pop it into this stand here. Oh, Christoph, thanks so much for the super chat. I appreciate it so much. And apologies for the confusion on last week. All right, Smalls says, does anyone know if this mic would be good for rapping? Well, we'll get you some samples in just a minute, and you can tell me how that sounds. I'm not a rapper myself, but we can get you some samples, and you can see how it sounds on voices. I think an interesting thing, I've heard questions like this before. I don't know that there are necessarily mics that are good for rapping or good for a specific genre of music necessarily. I think it's more about the fit to the specific voice and the effect that you want. So if you want something that has a lot of weight to it, maybe a little bit more low-end weight to it, that's a valid question, and we'll hear this one in just a minute here to see if it does have that kind of vibe to it.
Responsiveness would be good.
Responsiveness?
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean in terms of like transient response?
I don't know the mic
Okay.
term, but in other words, if you're talking super fast.
Yeah, if you're going fast. Okay, yeah, so that could be a thing, and maybe in some cases a small diaphragm condenser might be better too, but we'll have a listen. Rag and Bone Puppet Theater says, the RODE polar pattern is in the data sheet. Let's go take a look at that and see what we can find here. On the Mac, back to the Mac. I think there was a downloads section here somewhere. RODE has kind of changed their site such that here we go. Resources, data sheet. Here we go. Thank you so much, Dragonbone. Let's make that bigger so we can see it. And max SPL on the RODE is 142 dB SPL, so they're actually quite close. And it says that its equivalent input noise is 4 dB A-weighted. 100 ohm output impedance here. Oh, actually, RODE does show that as well. It's not quite as big a tail as the topping, but there is somewhat of a tail also on the RODE NT1, which is interesting because the original, it was much more common back in the olden days, 10 years ago, for a lot of the manufacturers, and even some of the manufacturers still will just put a single trace for the polar pattern and it won't show the tail at all, even though oftentimes there is somewhat of a tail. Yeah, okay, cool. All right. Let's get this mic queued up here. What's that? No, let's go back to the main camera here. Okay, so I have the mic hooked up here. Let's see, I don't have a traditional stand. It has a clip on it. Actually, now we can go to the overhead real quick, Danny. It has this kind of clip here where you kind of just cinch it down. It's expecting a round mic stand. We don't actually have that right now. We're using this RODE desktop stand, so I'll see if I can rig it up in some fashion here. Maybe we can get something to work. We can go back to the main camera here. There we go. It's got long thread shaft. I think we're getting closer. Closer. Probably hearing some of this. Again, just for notes, we are still hearing the Earthworks Ethos microphone. Have not switched over to the topping yet. Okay, feels like maybe that's going to hold pretty decently. And what I'm going to do is turn everything here. Okay, that should do it. So there's our pop shield. Now, for on-camera use, you know, it's a large diaphragm condenser with a traditional shock mount and pop shield, so not necessarily ideal for on-camera use, but you could probably make something work. All right, what I want to do too is I want to be able to go back and forth, so I'm going to go ahead and rig up the NT1. If there are any other questions in the meantime while I'm getting set up, we can go ahead and pop those on the screen.
Do you want to do off-topic questions?
Actually, we can, yeah. If we want to go back to the start, I think Mr. Joe Gooch had a question. Sorry, just moved my mic out of the way. Let me pull that back. We got a lot going on here. Here is the RODE shock mount, which is also fairly imposing. Mr. Joe Gooch says, "Hi Curtis, I use a Sennheiser 416 with a Voxbox vocal booth, dimensions of 60 by 60 by 60 centimeters. But I sometimes get artifacts in my recordings. Would a DPA 2017 work better? Thank you." Well, Mr. Joe Gooch, I would need a little bit more information. I'm not sure what kind of artifacts you're talking about, so it depends. I will say that a shotgun microphone in a 60 by 60 by 60 centimeter little box, isolation box, can have a tendency to sound somewhat boxy. It's not catching the threads here.
You've got it tilted towards you.
Oh, okay. There we go. Looks like it caught now. Okay, yeah. So 60 by 60 by 60 centimeter box isolation, in this case the Voxbox, is relatively small. And those, even though they do a decent job at managing reflected sound from walls and things like that, they do have a tendency to sound rather boxy. And so what I have found is typically, regardless of the microphone, oftentimes you'll need to do some EQ, and there's usually some emphasis somewhere between 200 and 400 hertz. So you'll want to cut somewhere in between there. that should help remove some of that boxy sound, maybe up to 500 hertz. So that's worth a try. I don't know that switching to another $1,000 microphone, that would not be my first move. I would actually work on EQing first. Again, depends on the type of artifact that you're experiencing, but that's my thought on that. Okay, Mr. Ruff, we need to have Jude on to talk about his failure. We learn from mistakes. You know, that's a great idea. Jude, what are your thoughts? First, we'll go to Mark. Mark, maybe you can host a session where we all share our biggest audio mistakes. God knows I've learned a lot from my own screw-ups, LOL. Same here, for sure. Definitely same here. I think that's a good idea. It's a really good idea, actually. Yanti, did you try a new Resolve? 20 beta has Audio Assistant, analyzes the timeline audio, and intelligently creates a professional audio mix. What do you think about that? Gimmick? It's a great question. I actually have tried it, Yanti, and the experience I had with it so far, so it was a simple mix. It was just dialogue with a music bed, dialogue from 3 people and a music bed. And it actually, what I like about it is that it wasn't perfect, no, by any means, but what it did do that was good was it applied its settings, what it thought it needed to do, but it left it open so you could adjust those settings, which was cool. I think they're just getting started on that, but I'm really happy to see it's essentially an auto mix. It has essentially auto mix capabilities. It did a decent job, and we had to tune it a little bit more. But yeah, it was actually really good. So, for example, I think the people that are going to benefit the most are those that do long-form podcasts or long-form video interviews. It can do a lot of the initial pass of that and all that tedious work, and then you can go in and actually tune it and get it sounding exactly how you want. So I say thumbs up so far. Okay. Can Danny wrap Sherlock for us? It's going to wrap. Cool. It was easier. No, I don't think I'm not a rapper.
No, I was supposed to do.
Yeah, I know. How was Mother's Day, Danny?
Very nice.
Danny said very nice with 2 thumbs up. So thank you, Matt.
And one more.
Sound like a party with the Judds. I'll bring the tacos. That's perfect, Jude. Okay, let's get our microphones going here. Let's see. We are phantom powering.
Oh, here's one more.
Faders down. Turning phantom power on for each of the 2 microphones. There's another question Danny's going to put up. Daniel, does Topping's digital to analog conversion and amplifier engineering prowess translate to their mics? That's a great question. So I haven't used their audio interfaces or any of their hi-fi amplifiers or anything like that. But looking at it, it does appear that at least their marketing material seems to suggest they have some experience in that domain. There are some things on the audio interfaces I saw that I really like. For example, I think the 4-input desktop version had 2 headphone amps, which is really good, really helpful. Separate phantom power switches for each input. Nice little screen with meters on it. I've never heard them. I don't know anything about them beyond that, but it's a good question. Let's see what we get here. So we've got the microphones are all phantom powered. Now, I am going to switch over and switch back and forth between the RODE and the Topping. And the reason I'm comparing the RODE is that the RODE is roughly in the same price point. They appear to be aimed at the same markets. And I think it's primarily, even on Topping's website, and I think you see this on RODE sometimes too, but the target market seems to be home studio recording, primarily music, but also podcasting. So that's kind of what they're aiming for, not so much necessarily on-camera use. But I want to switch back and forth between them. They're similar priced. I'm not going to rap because I think that would be embarrassing for everybody, but I am going to read Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and a couple of things there. This is from A Study in Scarlet. So I will let you know what we're listening to here. And no compression, no noise gate, no de-essing, The only thing I have on is a high-pass filter at 70 hertz for each of them. So here we go. You may also have to adjust your audio levels because I'm not doing compression. We're now hearing the Topping CL101. Check, check, check. Yep, okay, that's it. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you're quite sure of the fact. This is the RODE NT1 Signature Series right here. And here is the quote from Sherlock Holmes, A Study in Scarlet. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you're quite sure of the fact. Now, we're switching back over to the Topping CL101, and I'm curious, Danny had an interesting look on her face, but I'm curious if you would leave down in the chat what your impressions are so far of these two different microphones. I feel like I'm hearing quite a bit of top end on this one too, but just for reference, here's a little bit more. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you're quite sure of the fact. Back to the RODE NT1 Signature Series. It was easier to know it than to explain why I know it. If you were asked to prove that 2 and 2 made 4, you might find some difficulty, and yet you're quite sure of the fact. Okay, and back over to the Topping CL101. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. I need to take these off. It's disorienting. Matt Ruff says, RODE wins round 1. Okay. Articulate, please. What is it that you like about the RODE versus the Topping? Curious about that. Topping has, according to Rag and Bone Puppet Theater, Topping has less detail. Okay, interesting. Good, thanks for sharing that. Appreciate that a lot. Eric, it's not too sibilant, but RODE felt like it had a little less sibilance. Okay, good, good. The Topping sounds somewhat nasal from Udo. Thank you for that, Udo. By the way, for reference, let me just say one thing about Udo's comment. I do have a nasal voice, by the way, just if we're being honest here. And I have actually found that the Neumann U87 AI, which I own, I don't like using the sound of that right out of the box or right out of the recorder because it emphasizes the nasal texture of my voice or the nasal characteristic of my voice, and it sounds like the Topping may be doing a similar thing. Topping sounds thinner and kind of lifeless from Mark. Very good. Thanks for sharing that. RODE is warmer and less brittle. Cool. Luft, thanks for that. Yeah, Topping definitely has some different sound reproduction from Brad. Topping seems crunchy at the high end. It does definitely, by its frequency response chart. So if we go back to the Mac just really quickly here, looks like there seems to be a little bit of a theme developing. This is the RODE's frequency response chart. It starts boosting somewhere about the 2, 3, 4 kilohertz, and it kind of maxes out at 4.5 dB once it gets past 10 kilohertz. On the other hand, the Topping, see if it shows it here. This might just be the quick, oh, here we go. The Topping definitely starts boosting around maybe 1500 kilohertz. It starts going up, and it tops out at 4.5 once you get to 4 kilohertz. So that's definitely the sibilance range. My sibilance often lives in around 5K. So it has a different high frequency response for sure. Definitely, it seems to be that we're hearing that. Brad, will we get other voice references today? Not today, but perhaps in the final full review. Similar sound, Topping sounds a bit more narrow. Very good, thank you. All right. Well, there's our first sample. Let's do another thing here. We're still on the Topping CL101. Let me just tap the stand here just to see how well this shock mount does in terms of isolating. I'm tapping my headphones on. It does pretty well, actually. For reference, here's the RODE. Okay, here's the RODE. Huh, the RODE does even better. Substantially. Okay, back to the topping. Yeah, the RODE shock mount. To be fair, the RODE shock mount is substantially larger. So yeah, we are getting some tapping, some transfer of that mechanical noise. Okay, cool. We are on the topping still. What I'd like to do is talk around the side of it so you can hear how its pickup of my voice changes as we get off to the side and then to the back. So to do that, take this sandbag out here. Okay, so I'm talking into the front of the microphone. This is the front of the microphone. I'm going to start rotating. Little crunched for room. Okay, front of the microphone, 0 degrees on axis with the Topping CL101. Now we're moving off until we're about 90 degrees off axis. Now what we're listening for is obviously it's going to be quieter, but the question is, does it change the timbre of my voice as well? Do certain frequencies get emphasized or de-emphasized? And we'll continue moving around the microphone at a similar distance. And here we are at the back of the microphone, 180 degrees off axis into the back of the microphone. And then I'm hearing more, it sounds really phasey, but that's mostly reflected sound. So it's reflecting off of the screen, the teleprompter, the screen. I've got a near field monitor. It's doing some weird phase stuff there. Coming back to 90 degrees off axis. This is 90 degrees off axis. And then we're back on axis on the front of the microphone. So there's some samples there. Tell me what you're hearing there. This is also ear training for you. So what are you hearing off axis when we go around? Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. This is to give you a sense of the proximity effect. Here I am right up on the microphone, backing off. Now we're about 10 centimeters from the front of the microphone. We're going a little farther back, and you can hear it thins out pretty quickly there. So you definitely have some proximity effect here. All right, let's pause and hear what the people in the chat have to say. Luft. Let me get the sandbag managed here so this thing doesn't tip over. There we go. Okay. The topping seems like it wants to be compared to the Stellar X2 from TZ Audio. Yeah, that's one I unfortunately don't own that one. I did test it and review it at one point several years ago. And then I think it was also the X3 that I also reviewed. But yeah, I think they're kind of in that's another example of microphones in the same category. Topping have more bass. Okay, very good. You would think that the heavier body would help to isolate it better. That seems not to be the case. Yeah, I think it has more to do. Yeah, I think the shock mounting, the external shock mounting is what seems to have a bigger impact here. In fact, let me switch back over to my main microphone and show you the difference between these two. Okay, here we are back on the Earthworks, just for reference. And let's go to the overhead camera, Danny, really quick here. And let me just show you. So here is the shock mount for the topping. Okay, and what I can do is, let me just pop that out of the stand. And then for reference, here is the RODE. Need to kind of untangle it. I have using sandbags here to keep things from tipping over. The RODE shock mount is substantially larger, and I think what we're seeing there is maybe either the design or the size is having an impact there. So pretty big difference in terms of the size of the shock mount. Cool. All right. Sure needs the pop filter. So for reference, let's do that on the RODE as well. I think the RODE also needs the pop filter. Let's switch back to the overhead here, or the main camera. And then we have another request. Okay. Sorry for the mic bumps. We're working in a tight space here. Okay, we are now on the RODE. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Not peckers. Peppers. Okay. Back to the earthworks. Yeah. They both need pop filters. Try the pickle speech from the side. I'm not sure what you mean, Brad. By the side, what do you mean? Do you mean where I'm talking past it? Or talking directly into it? Or talking into the side of the microphone? Not sure I follow. Okay, back on the RODE NT1. I can certainly... Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Okay. Off-axis side of mic. Huh. Okay, sure. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple pickled peppers. It's hard to do this with headphones on and latency. So that's the RODE NT1. Topping squeeze clamps may transfer vibrations, possibly. Although, possibly. Yeah, I don't know. It is lined with a felt of some sort or a foam of some sort. So I think that actually might be intended to provide some additional isolation. Matt says, I have the RODE shock mount on my RODE Procaster. It's a very good shock mount. Yeah, I think RODE's been making them for a while. I think they've got those sorted out. By the way, right now we're listening to the RODE right now. That's what you're hearing is the RODE. Let's go back to the Earthworks. Back on the Earthworks ethos, and let's get my topping rigged back up here. Okay, where did I do with the, here it is. Sandbag so we don't have a catastrophe. There we go. All right, back on the Topping CL101 again. Not quite close enough. Okay, back on the Topping CL101. All right. Other impressions, other questions? Hit us in the chat. There is one other thing I'll say. What I did not find on the Topping website was warranty information. And the RODE has a 10-year warranty. I don't know what the warranty is on this or what the service is like on this. So that would be another question that would, I think, have impact on the overall value of the purchase. But again, it's a fairly inexpensive microphone. And Matt says, I'd stay with Earthworks at twice the price. Actually, what does an Earthworks Ethos cost these days? I think it's $400. I don't know. Let's check. We're over here at B&H. We're going to take a look here. Earthworks, Ethos, $400. Yeah, so twice the price of the RODE and more than twice the price of the Topping. Looks like B&H wants me to accept all cookies, and I like cookies. So not that kind of cookie, actually. All right, back to the chat. The pickle speech has some extra plosives and S's that really stress the Topping, I feel, versus the RODE, which handles it slightly better. That's cool. Good analysis there. Rag and Bone Puppet Theater, a bit off topic, but any tips on avoiding sound transfer from taps on a mic cable? Yeah, that's also, well, getting the mic cable out of the way so that it won't be tapped from the start. That's I mean, I don't mean to be condescending with that answer. That's not my intent, but that is, I think, one thing you want to consider is always keeping the cable away from places where it could potentially get bumped or tapped or pulled or anything like that. And then beyond that, again, using a shock mount will also help. There to some extent. Usually, for example, when I put it on a mic stand, I will wrap it around on in the case of this RODE desktop stand, there are actually that only works for USB cables, but because the XLR connectors are too large. But typically, I'll wrap if it's not a desktop stand that has channels for the microphone cable, I'll wrap them around the cable just to keep them away from where they're likely to get touched, bumped, pulled, or anything like that.
You mean wrapped around the stand?
Wrapped around a stand, excuse me. Yes. Udo, I always have my voice talents not speak directly into the mics, but like you did just now, like 60 degrees so that the plosives don't hit the capsule. Absolutely right. Agreed. And that's good microphone technique. For those that don't know what Udo's talking about specifically, right now I'm talking directly into the microphone capsule. A good technique is to move it off just a little bit off axis like this. So it's not right in front of the mouth where the little puffs of air come out, but it's off to the side aimed at the mouth. That way it's still picking up the full voice, but it's not getting the plosives, the little bursts of air hitting the microphone capsule and creating distortion. So that's what Udo's referring to there. Or you can use a pop shield like that. Rag and Bone, thanks. You bet. Thanks for the question. Always insightful. Let's do this. This is a little uncomfortable. Because of the space constraints, I'm going to switch back to the Earthworks now. Here we are back on the Earthworks Ethos, and we have a question in the chat, or not in the chat, a question that was submitted ahead of time that I'd like to take a look at. This is from Walter. He says, I want to use a Nikon Z6 or Z6 for filming interviews and debates using mic lavaliers connected to the camera via Zoom F6. Is it normal to get more noise that way via the Zoom F6 compared to connecting a mic lavalier directly to the camera? Or do you have any idea about which settings should be modified? So Walter's actually signed up for the Zoom F6 course at the school. So Walter, I would say this. If you have already gone through the section where we talk about calibrating the levels on the F6 in your camera, and you've already done that, everything is good there. Some of the earlier copies of the Zoom F6 had a noisier output when you reduce the output level. So there was actually a hardware problem. If that's what you're experiencing, then yes, there would be more noise using the Zoom F6, but that's an issue with the Zoom F6 itself. The way to get around that is to use an attenuation cable that goes from the Zoom F6 output to the input on the Nikon. So that should get you better results. If you do a search for Zoom F6 Curtis Judd on YouTube, you'll see there's a video where I talk about that, and we also leave a link to the specific cable that you can use as well. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Walter. Okay, that was the question that was submitted ahead of time. Let's let's go back to the chat and see what else is going on here. Wilfred, you really suggest for such both microphones used for dialogue? Well, no, let me be clear. What we're sampling today is dialogue. Are these mics better suited for other things potentially? Possibly, yeah. It might be that maybe the CL101 is going to shine on specific instruments a little bit better. And that may vary from instrument to instrument, or specific, like if I'm talking, maybe I'm referring to drums versus a stringed instrument. And maybe a specific drum would sound better with this mic. There's always variance. So all we're doing here is providing some dialogue samples, just because that's what we do. So I'm not suggesting that anyone draw any conclusions about whether these microphones are good or bad based on these samples alone. This is just one data point. That's the idea. I like the sound better when you were talking a bit on the side. Ah, okay. And now I was also up pretty close to it too, so there may have been a little bit more proximity effect going on. We can do that again. Rag and Bone, FYI, cheap mic cable can induce microphonics into the audio just by tapping or bumping the cable. Not sure if that might be your problem. Yeah, great point, Audio Buff. Cable quality matters for a variety of things. That's one of the things. The other thing is picking up interference from electromagnetic fields, so EMF fields. And that's usually going to be something that's going to be picked up oftentimes by power adapters and things like that. So if your cable's near any of those, cheaper cables have a bigger tendency to allow that interference in, whereas higher quality, better shielded cables, like in my experience, Mogami or Canary cables tend to do better at rejecting those things. Mark, Rag and Bone Puppet Theater, loops in the cable can help prevent mechanical noise from below the loop. A very loose knot will work as well. Good advice there too. Thanks for that, Mark. For ADR, I use 2 different mics to choose from later in post. That's a great idea. And also, it sounds like, Udo, you're using them at an appropriate distance, so there's not a lot of that proximity effect necessarily, which is also good. So that allows you to fit 2 microphones in there, but also ensure that, or probably I'm guessing also positioning them so that there's not a lot of proximity effect like this. Matt says, I'll stick to my Earthworks for drums. I have lots of experience on drums. I think miking drums is such an art. An exciting one with lots of lots of different options out there. All right. Did we answer the questions? We got Joe Gooch's question from the start, so I think we're good there. Okay. Good. Has anyone tried the Topping audio interfaces, and what has been your experience if you did? I'm curious about them. They looked actually quite nice. Another warning while we're here and talking about it. The RODE, in my experience, and most people I've talked to that have listened to my voice through both a Neumann U87 and a RODE NT1, prefer my voice on a RODE NT1, which is a microphone that is $200 versus the $3,600 or whatever it is on the Neumann. So I'm share that to highlight the idea that just because a microphone doesn't sound really great on my voice doesn't mean it's not a good microphone. It just means that I think what you're hearing with the Topping is, I think the Topping is probably a little more brutally honest about my voice than the RODE is. But the RODE, just right out of it, sounds better. Mr. Joe Gooch, the self-noise on this mic is unbelievable for the price. Can it really be as low as claimed? Well, let's go back to the mic. We're in a real, here's the thing is I don't really have a way to measure that. But here I am on the Earthworks. Now here I am on the Topping. Roughly, I think they're roughly gained up to the same levels. I'll let you listen to that and think and hear if you hear any difference. The Earthworks spec for noise is, let's see. Give me a second to get over to the Earthworks site. Here we are. Do we have the specs? Let's see. Here we go. 16 dB. Oh, they are actually listing it in SPL as well. Interesting. Okay, maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought I'd seen it listed as dBu in other specs, but here they're saying 16 dB SPL A-weighted. So, relative to the topping, the Earthworks is 4 times more self-noise. So you're hearing the topping right now. Now let me switch back over to the Earthworks. Here's the Earthworks. Now, this is not fair because I have a compressor on. Let me go ahead and turn the compressor off. And the gate off. And make sure there's no de-esser, no de-esser. Okay, now here we are on the Earthworks with no processing. And what?
You sound like Bert.
I sound like Bert?
On Sesame Street.
On Sesame Street. I sound like Bert on Sesame Street. Oh,
well,
that's good.
Not just slightly.
Slightly. Here's some silence. There are some fans running in the room, but this is 4 times the self-noise of the topping. Now we're on the RODE NT1, and this has the same spec as the topping for self-noise. Now we're back on the Earthworks. So I think the reality in my experience, let me go ahead and turn the processing back on here. This is for the Earthworks. We've got the compressor back on. We've got the gate back on. And I have a high pass filter at, right around 70 hertz there. Okay, so that's the Earthworks. Were you able to hear a big difference in noise? I think the noise accumulates, but I don't think the topping is, from what I've heard so far, I don't think the topping is going to be a problem in terms of self-noise. I think you're going to have to worry about your room a lot more. Mr. Joe Gooch, the VoxBox sounds surprisingly unboxy. I'm just concerned the 416 may fare worst in an enclosed space, and the shorter length and all-round vents on the 2017 may sound better. Oh, Joe, I don't know. I believe I compared the 2017 and the 416 in my review of the 2017, but we didn't go into any small spaces to really test it. I was in a relatively open basement with sound blankets at greater than arm's length from me, so I'm really not sure. Maybe if you can source one and try it, I think that would be ideal, but I don't know that I would expect a big difference, but I could be wrong. Rag and Bone, no audible difference in noise. Yeah, because I think if you're in the teens and lower, I think usually you're not going to do that. It's interesting how it's a specification and it is a consideration, self-noise of a piece of audio equipment, especially, it can accumulate as well. If you have an extraordinarily noisy preamplifier and a moderately noisy microphone, self-noise microphone, the combination is not necessarily great. But another thing, and I think this is actually something that Danny's waving me on, but I have a very important thing to say here. Specs are easy because they're numbers, and you can compare if they're actually measuring the same thing. However, what most people struggle with when they're recording dialogue, spoken word audio, is they are struggling with noise floor. And noise floor is usually noise that's actually in the room, and different microphones will pick that up differently. Microphones with less dynamic range, you may hear more noise floor. So I actually think that things like dynamic range may be a more important factor if you're struggling with that kind of issue. So that more important than equivalent input noise, unless the equivalent input noise spec is something like, 28 dB A-weighted. So anyway, there's a thought there. So kind of don't go just by the specs. Can be more things involved. Okay.
We have several comments and questions, so let's keep moving.
Several comments and questions, so let's keep moving. Danny says, topping seems to measure really well according to Audio Science Review. Clinically accurate seems to be the consensus for their playback equipment approach. That's what I seem to be hearing on the microphone as well. So some of you are saying nasally. Yeah, that's probably closer to reality. Fachiri, hey, anyone have any experience with press boxes or multi boxes? I'm pretty sure passive and active boxes work pretty much the same, but if anyone has info, I believe Audio Buff does. There's your guy. Whatever you do, make sure the multi boxes are transformer isolated so someone taking a press feed with a bad cable won't cause problems for everyone else, including the original source. Yeah, you need that isolation. I sound better on my Lewitt or Procaster than on my Earthworks, and I love Earthworks mic, so you have to pick the right mic for the talent. Couldn't agree more, Matt. Bert is good. Bert is good. I like Bert. Such a innocent, lovely character. Have you tried the Deity DLTX or DXTX? I have not. No, unfortunately. Not available yet here, at least not for me. For your mailing question, I'm wondering if a ground loop filter between his F6 and the Z6 would help. I know it helped me when I used the Z6 in that application. Ah, great input, Mark. Thank you for that. So that's another possibility as well. Yeah, if you're getting some sort of hum or buzzing noise, hum in particular, that can be a ground loop issue. And so being able to filter that out may be helpful as well. Thanks, Mark. Good point. Gate? I am not sure what that means. Sorry about that, Wilfred. Gate? Brecasty in post? Not sure the context. Thanks, Buff. I rented out a Whirlwind passive box, which supposedly has transformer isolation on all the inputs, outputs, so no tests yet. Yeah, that's going to be the big factor there. Is you would just want to keep everything isolated from each other, and that's what a transformer does for those. Daniel says, noise floor tends to not matter as much in some cases if the AC is blasting in the room too. That's absolutely right. Like, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, the equivalent input noise spec doesn't matter so much if the AC is blasting is what I mean by that is, if you're not managing the noise in your room, doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter what the equivalent input noise spec is. You've got bigger problems you need to solve. So, however, on the bright side, those noise reduction plugins are getting really good. So, doesn't necessarily help with live unless you can run one that's live. There are some of those as well, and they can help. But those are some thoughts there. All right. Any last questions? We have 2 minutes. If you've got a question, at Curtis Judd Audio in the chat, Danny will get it up on the screen, and we will talk about it. Thanks to Topping for sending this over. Full disclosure, they sent this to me. Actually, it was not even Topping. It was, I think they hire a marketing agency to help them with contacts in the United States. So they sent this to me. They have not paid me further. So I told them I would do an honest review, and so far, we've been 100% honest. I think what I can say about the Topping CL101 is that it seems to me quite good for the price. I would say that for my voice, it needs some EQ, but it does seem to be quite accurate. I do have some nasally characteristics in my voice, so definitely seems to be capturing those as well, but good starting point for sure, and I think a useful mic.
I think they're talking about the noise.
Wilfred, it's gone for the noise when you speak about noise floor. Okay, I'm not again.
I think those were the questions.
Okay. Also, sending output from my MixPre 10.2, so I'm a little concerned about that, but the outputs on the MixPre 10.2 are pretty hot, so it should be fine. Yeah, they're definitely plus 4 dBu line level, as I understand it. So you should be fine there. You just need that adapter cable to go from the mini XLR to the full size probably. But yeah, good idea to test as well. Okay, friends, I think that brings us to the end of another delightful Sound for Video session. Delightful because you're here. Thank you all so much for your being a part of this little community. Thanks for caring about sound and making the world a better sounding place. Get out there and make some great sound this week, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.